The Jared Dillian Show.
I'm Jared Dillian. This is the Jared Dillian Show. If you want to call to talk about your money, please call 844-305-7800. That's 844-305-7800. This is the Jared Dillian Show. I'll say it one more time. Nah, I'm not going to say it again. I just got back from Atlanta. I got back about midnight last night. You know, it's a pretty long drive. Atlanta to Myrtle Beach. It's about 6 hours. I did it in 5:40. I was driving fast. I'm not really a fast driver, but I was driving fast. But I got my tattoo sleeve finished on my left arm, and it looks pretty badass. It looks pretty awesome. And it is sore. It feels like a bag of smashed hammers. It feels bad. I had a lot of black work done. I have large areas where it's just all black, including on the inside of my arm, like the upper inside of my arm. And that was very painful. It was very painful. And the funny thing, getting tattooed is kind of like an interesting experience. It's I find it sort of enjoyable. Like there's something about like small amounts of pain over long periods of time. It kind of releases some endorphins. But when the pain gets really bad, like it's just weird. Like your body does weird stuff. Like it releases all this adrenaline. You start feeling all these emotions. I mean, it's pretty wild. But I'm glad I got it done. I got to go back for one more in November, and then I'll be done. I swear I'll be done. I want to talk about Alyssa Milano. I think Alyssa Milano was like every boy's crush back in the 80s, and I thought she was super cute back then. I didn't watch Who's the Boss all the time. I was always on the lookout for Alyssa Milano. I saw her, this was 2007 or so, I saw her at a restaurant called Nobu 57 in New York City, and I didn't recognize her at first. So I saw this woman walk in with a date, and I said, that is the most beautiful woman I've ever seen in my entire life. And she sits down like 10 feet away from me. And then I couldn't stop staring at her, and I was like, oh, that's Alyssa Milano. She's very attractive, just amazingly attractive. She's also very liberal and very active on Twitter. So she tweeted this last week. She said, "We need a national shutdown now. Print cash. Give people universal basic income until we get this pandemic under control." I'll say that again. Print cash. Give people universal. What? So, okay, that's a proposal. We'll consider that for a second. So what would be the consequences of that? I mean, just to have the Federal Reserve print money and give it to people and have them sit at home. Like, what would they do with the money? Well, I think Amazon would probably go to 10,000 for starters. But that's kind of my point, is that it would create lots and lots of inflation. Having the Fed print money and hand it out to people is a bad idea. It's a bad idea. And I think anybody who has any intuitive understanding of economics knows that this will create lots and lots of inflation. And by the way, the markets right now are starting to price in inflation. Copper is going up, gold is going up, silver is going up. If you look at the back end of the yield curve between 10s and 30s, that's steepening. There's just a lot of inflation indicators out there. And that's what happens when you print trillions of dollars and when the government spends trillions of dollars and goes trillions of dollars into debt. That's what happens. You get inflation. So we're seeing signs of it everywhere. And we're starting to get, like we've seen in the data, we got slightly more inflation than expected last week. CPI, the Consumer Price Index, they were expecting 1.1%. We got 1.2%. And not like that's really a big deal. But the reason why it's sort of a big deal is because we're in the middle of a pandemic, which is a deflationary shock. And you would not expect inflation to be beating expectations in the middle of a pandemic. It's noteworthy. Don't you think it's weird that we are getting inflation rather than deflation in the middle of a pandemic. Prices should be going down. Consumption is down. Prices should be going down, but prices are not going down. They're going up. My grocery bill is higher. It's demonstrably higher. I talk about the cat litter example all the time. I'm spending probably 50% more on cat litter than I was 5 years ago. Everything is more expensive. Meat got more expensive. There's a lot of stuff that, toilet paper got more expensive. It feels like I've been talking a lot about inflation lately, and it's important. This is like the big theme. This is the big theme. This is the beginning of this. We're going to be talking about this for years to come. I saw an article last week about how the Fed is, now the Fed has an inflation target. Okay, so they want inflation to be 2%. That's their target. And what that means is if inflation is higher than 2%, they want to try to bring it down. But if inflation is lower than 2%, they want to bring it up. Right now, they're trying to bring it up. The article was talking about how they want to abandon the inflation target altogether or overshoot the inflation target by a lot to get inflation going. And this is a very bad idea because once you reverse inflationary expectations, it's very difficult to get them under control. And it's almost impossible. I mean, we are here enjoying these low prices because of Paul Volcker in 1981. We are here because of him. So anyway, that's kind of a longer economic story. He was chairman of the Fed. Jimmy Carter made him chairman of the Fed towards the end of his term, and he was chairman of the Fed until 1986 under Ronald Reagan. And he raised interest rates a lot in order to get inflation under control. And it unleashed a hurricane-force recession. You want to talk about a bad recession? GDP was down 6% because of those rate hikes in the beginning of Reagan's term. And there was no politics about it. Reagan did not try to stop Volcker. Even though Volcker handed him a recession, Reagan did not try to stop Volcker. Because the consensus was that inflation needed to be brought under control. Everybody was on board. I mean, the Fed is not in a position right now where they can raise interest rates. So, is it too early to start protecting yourself from inflation? Well, it might be too early to start protecting yourself, but it's not too early to start thinking about it. And one way you can do this is the Awesome portfolio, which we've talked about a bunch. There's lots of protection against inflation in the Awesome portfolio because you have gold and you have real estate and you also have stocks. Stocks are also protection against inflation. By the way, if you want to check out the Awesome portfolio, go to theawesomeportfolio.com. Gold is probably the cleanest way to protect yourself against inflation. Gold made new highs again today. It's very close to taking out the all-time highs of $1,900 an ounce, which they made back in 2011. And gold and silver. Silver is on fire. Once silver gets above $20 an ounce, it is going to be off to the races, and it is going to be magnificent. So, but the price of gold is already pretty high, which might deter you from investing in gold. I started investing in gold when it was $600 an ounce. Now it's $18 and something an ounce. Could it go to $2,000? Yeah, I could get there next week. Could it go to $3,000 or $4,000? Yeah, for sure it could. And, the other thing about gold is that the supply-demand picture for gold is not looking good. We found all the gold in the world. There's just not a lot of reserves out there. We've pretty much found all the gold that we're going to find on the planet. Now, this is what people said about oil back about 15 years ago. People were talking about peak oil, and it turned out not to be peak oil. That was a very bad prediction. But, I mean, I don't really see where the gold is going to come from unless we start mining asteroids with spaceships and bringing it back to Earth. And investment demand is going up. By the way, there are some central banks that are buying gold. China and Russia have been buying gold. The Fed has more gold than any other central bank in the world. We have like 2,400 tons of it or something like that, but we haven't bought any since the 70s. And yes, it's all stored at Fort Knox. If you saw Goldfinger, it's in Kentucky. That's where it is. Pretty amazing if you think about it, that all of our treasure is in one location. Now, we used to have something called a gold standard. You might not know what a gold standard is. A gold standard is when every dollar is backed by something of objective value, which is gold. And a long time ago, back in the 30s, gold was $32 an ounce. As I said, now it's $1,800 an ounce. What happened? What happened? Well, the dollar has lost value in gold terms over that time. I mean, the dollar has lost, since the introduction of the Federal Reserve, has lost about 97% of its value. Doesn't mean people are 97% poorer, but if you bought gold in 1917 and held it to today, you would be pretty happy. So, could we go back on a gold standard again? I mean, you know, theoretically we could. I think we would have to have a lot of pain in order for that to happen. We would have to have way more inflation than we had in the 70s, and that I think is probably a long way off. So I don't see us going back on a gold standard again. But we, you know, from a mechanical standpoint, we could do it. We could just revalue all the gold to $12,000 an ounce. And then every dollar would be backed by gold, and we would have a gold standard. I'm Jared Dillian. This is The Jared Dillian Show.
The Jared Dillian Show.